Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. This is the final session on the history of health and health systems. I lost you there, Catherine. Do you want me to start again?
Yeah, just again. You know what? I can see that my phone is showing red, as if all the stuff of me putting this darn thing in didn't work. You know, it says that my battery's about to run out again.
Okay, just check if it's
sorry, Alison.
No,
no
stress.
I elaborately cracked this all in, only for it not to work. Let me see if I can.
And how many minutes do you think this you'll manage for this one?
Well, it's on red.
So I think just make sure it's charging, and then we can maybe stop recording, Alison. We can try again.
Oh no! I'll record, because if I can pause. Yeah, I can pause.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. This is our final session on the history of health and health systems in South Africa. Can I please welcome Catherine to the call? Hi, Catherine.
Hello. Thank you, Stephen.
So, Catherine, last week when we were discussing the transformation from 1994 to 2003, we looked at a lot of changes in legislation, including the Constitution of South Africa of 1996. We made mention of the White Paper for the Transformation of the Health System of 1997. And all of this preceded the National Health Act of 2003, and that's kind of where we left off. And I thought that would be a place to start, and maybe just thinking about what was happening around the time. It was the end of Mbeki's presidency. There was a lot of contestation in Mbeki's cabinet around the etiology of HIV and the fact that he made the claim that HIV does not cause AIDS, and that denialist heritage that he left behind. And yet at the same time, we had this new act, the National Health Act, which brought into legislation, it structured the way that our health system is formed, the different levels of governance within the health system, and the mandate between national, provincial, and local government. So maybe we can start by just unpacking a little bit about this go-between, this fight for antiretroviral therapy on the one hand, and an act that structures the way that our health system is meant to deliver services going forward.
Yeah, I love the way you've put that, because it's like these two streams coming together. Most of the students in this class were probably toddlers or very young children when this struggle was going on. And now as adults, it's fascinating, I'm sure, for the students to think about the challenges. Let's look at the one stream coming in. There'd been an epic fight, as we spoke about at the end of the last video, with a broad cross-section of people, many of whom had been very loyal ANC cadres and rank-and-file members before. And it also drew in a lot of scientists and other people and pediatricians and health planners, insisting that we take the HIV crisis seriously and insisting that we roll out whatever effective treatment there was available to preserve human life, to preserve the dignity and value of life, and to prevent transmission to very young infants and children, and really face the scourge head on. And on the other side, we had a whole lot of people who were on the one hand either very, very anxious about the cost of this, or questioning whether we would ever be able to have a human population able to take and then live for a long time if there was no vaccine on daily drugs, a sort of pharmaceutical citizenship. And then bundled into that was another position, and it was connected to the first, a questioning whether or not HIV existed separate to hunger and other forms of burdens on the body, of poverty and of suffering. And the person who was pushing that argument was the leader of the whole country and the elected head of the ANC and, of course, our president, Thabo Mbeki. And he had coalesced around him people in the cabinet who were taking increasingly defensive positions. And so this very, very complex set of arguments eventually finds resolution in a liturgical way or in a legal way in a profoundly important constitutional court case, which is using the Constitution of 1996 and using the health acts that had been passed up to that point, although the National Health Act was just waiting in the wings in 2003, not quite passed yet, it was using a huge cornucopia of new progressive human rights-based health planning and health legislation. And the complainants who had organized themselves into a group like the TSC on the one side and the Save the Babies campaign on the other, they presented the court with what they felt was compelling evidence that treating people with available drugs for HIV was part of the mandate of the government. It was required by the law, and it had to happen because scientifically it was the best possible outcome for an individual. And of course, one of the build-ups to this was the fight inside of Parliament. And many members of opposition parties like the Pan-Africanist Congress argued that if these drugs were really poisonous, then there'd be no possible way that private health insurance companies would provide them. And it would also not be possible for people in cabinet or in government to be on private health plans and take them. And it was discovered through various combative procedures in Parliament that in fact there were quite a number of parliamentarians and possibly even cabinet members who were in fact HIV positive and taking these drugs. This was all kept at the level of anonymity to protect people's dignity and rights, but pushing that issue into the public domain opened up the contradictions again. Well, the court sat in 2002, and after a very complex and fascinating set of judgments, they ruled that in fact the complainants were correct and that the cabinet had to roll out and create a plan for a coordinated, carefully managed program of provisioning of pharmaceutical treatment, whatever was available, the best that was available, and they had to use all of their powers and all of their entities of government to negotiate the best prices for the drugs and work with civil society.